I'm a very anxious person. So talking in front of people is really difficult. Talking to people is difficult. But when I go on stage, I've never experienced stage fright before. So when I get on stage and I do a poem that's talking about how I am as a person, or how I think or how I feel, I get so into it. I just zone out the rest of the world. And I think I need to do a good job because I need people to understand me and see how I see things.
Hi, my name is Rachel. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a TAC member.
Hi, my name is Evelyn. I use she, her pronouns, and I am also a TAC member.
Hey, I am Carolina. I use they, them, and I'm on TAC as well.
Hi, I'm Devin. I'm a poet.
Cool. What pronouns do you use?
I use she, they pronouns, but any works.
Today we have a very special person who is Devin. She writes amazing, amazing poetry and takes inspiration from many aspects of her life. We are going to play a fun game to get started. I'm going to call it the word poem. I'm going to give you a word, and then using every single letter of that word, you're going to create a poem.
All right.
Okay. Your first word is wonder. WONDER.
I'm already ready. Let's go.
Okay. W.
World filled with
O.
obnoxious humans.
N.
Normalcy is required.
D.
Events are desired.
R.
Reality means nothing.
Wow, that was really good. Snaps.
That was not what I was going to say.
Let's try another word, okay? One more. Let's do night. NIGHT. Night.
Okay, N, no more passion. I, in my existence. G, getting better. H, how? T, to be determined. I've never played that game. That's a good game though.
Okay, so now we're going to try and get to know you a little bit better. Usually we would do like fire round questions, but I think this one should be a little more informational. First question, what animal would you be?
A dog, but like my dog, because I think she got trained to be just like me.
What would be the theme song to your life?
I think Drugs on the Internet by LAUV. I don't know if it's Love or if it's Love. I can never remember how to say it. But it's just a song about getting some great things from the internet, like your happiness from the internet. It's a good song. I love it. And it kind of describes my relationship with the internet.
I think every teenager could relate to that, especially in this day and age. The next question, you've been given an elephant. You can't give it away or sell it. What do you do?
If I can't give it away and sell it, I can't give it to someone who could take better care of it. I'm going to become an elephant owner now. Got to give it the best life. My whole life is going to revolve around it. Because if I'm there, like, if they depend on me, I got to make sure that I do them right. So I will name it George.
What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Play a sport. My siblings, besides, I guess, my oldest brother, have all played sports. My brother has won a lot of awards for playing sports. My dad was his coach. I am horrible at playing sports though, and I'm so scared of like being on a team and letting them down. So, but I'm so worried about failing at it that I kind of don't let myself learn how to play it either. I also hate running.
What color do you think represents you right now?
I feel like neon pink sometimes when I'm performing. I just turn into a different version of myself. But in my day-to-day life, probably like a gray tone, like a cool gray, a light one. I'm very calm and I seem mature, but then I go on stage, and because especially with some of the poems I do, they're very in your face or very out there. I have to show some real emotions. So yeah,
Do you consider yourself an introvert or extrovert?
I'm an introvert. I don't like being around people, um, especially for long periods of time. I can get along well with people. It's just I get so tired and drained. I would much prefer to sit at home and knit and be with my dog and take a nap over being anywhere else.
What movie can you watch over again and again?
I would have to go with Disney's Coco because when I watched it during school, right in the middle of my like in middle school, and as soon as I finished it, I just started crying. It was so good. But I love it. I adore it. The final scenes just make me so happy. I'll just be singing the songs throughout my house. So I could probably watch it a million times and not get tired of it.
What or who inspires you?
I get a lot of inspiration actually from the Tacoma Art Museum. I go there and I pick a piece that I really like and I'll write a poem about it. I've done that a few times, but outside of that, I guess I would go with music, um, just random artists, random things like that. But going to the museums, especially where I live and go to school, it is surrounded by like 3 different museums. And I go to each of them and I just will pick something that stands out to me and I'll write about it.
So you talked about how when you're in that moment, you just start writing, but it's about what you're writing is how you feel and what's happening right then and there. And that's how I personally like to write songs too. Is that your preferred way of creating? Is that your preferred way of making your poems?
I think so. My school has a poetry club and we all have different ways of writing, I've noticed. Like some people will have this idea and they'll write it down and they'll start planning out what they want to say and organize it and how they want to do it. But for me, it's just I have an inner monologue, so I'm writing it down as soon as it comes into my head. And if I wait too long to write it down, it's just gone. So as soon as I get that passion, I have to write about it.
Do you have a common subject material that a lot of your poems are about, or something you like to write about, or like a specific style you like to write in?
For style, I tend to never have rhyming poems, or I'll have 1 or 2 lines rhyming with each other to put emphasis on what I'm trying to talk about. As for like topics, I write about a lot of different things. Like I'll write about just like flowers or having a crush on someone, and then I'll turn around, I'll write about like the state of the world and things like that. I tend to write about whatever I'm feeling, or I guess whatever is happening to me that I can relate to. So like the topics end up fluctuating a lot.
I was just gonna mention how like great it is that you're so versatile with like different subjects and still feeling like comfortable in those different topics. Cause like me as a writer, I feel like I only focus on one thing because I'm like too nervous to like approach something else and like wonder how that's gonna like reflect my other works because it's so different.
I see what you mean too. I There's a downside to my form of poetry. Right now I'm trying to gather some poems that all have like the same theme, and I can't really do that because then I'll have like I have over 100 written poems. I counted them because I keep them all into one place, and I only have like 5 that talks about a certain topic. So if I ever wanted to write a book, it'd be really difficult to find those pieces that match up with each other, and they all kind of have a different vibe to them. So there's some advantages and some disadvantages as well.
Why do you write? And when did you, was there a specific moment where you were like, I know why write and why I'm going to continue to write?
For me, there was a moment where I just like knew I loved performing a lot. It was when I was in the 6th grade, I believe, and my school was doing this thing where your first period class, your homeroom class, was going to be writing poetry. and you would, be allowed to present it in front of the class if you wanted to. So I did that. I wrote some poems and I liked how they turned out. I gave it to my language arts teacher and I made her cry. And it was the best feeling ever. It was great because it was like a really intense poem that I wrote. And it was just, looking back on it, it probably was not that good, but it was a starting place for me. It became my mission to do that, or to make people feel something with my words.
It's interesting that you view poetry not just as words on a paper, but as a performance. How did you come about thinking of that?
I got into poetry, really got into it when I got into high school, and there was there still is a lot of slam poetry on YouTube, and I was watching them, and they were so good, and they made me want to cry, and I felt ashamed of myself anytime I didn't cry because they were so good. And there was parts where they would add singing and music to the poetry. They would add movement to it. They would hold each other's hands. That's when I kind of realized that just because you're doing poetry doesn't mean it has to be this one way, that there's so many different ways to do it.
Do you write poems specifically to be performed, or is there a line somewhere?
Yes, there is. I have 2 different poem types. There's the beautiful poem, and then there's the performing pieces that I do. So there's the poems that are this is meant to be read in front of a class. A class would get this on a piece of paper and read it and supposed to analyze all the little things of it. And to me, when I read those ones, I'm like, oh, this sounds beautiful. This is lovely. It doesn't matter who's performing it, you still get the feel across. And then there's the performing pieces where it's if you just read it, it doesn't feel the same as when I perform it.
Do you find yourself doing the traditional way of writing poetry, where you write on in a little book or something, carry around a journal with you everywhere you go?
Oh, that's a good question. I have this notebook that I carry with me. I've noticed that there's 2 different ways of poetry that I write when I write in my book versus in my phone. When I write in my phone, it'll be very modern takes on poetry, slam poetry type of thing, versus in my book, it will be very traditional almost. And I love that book. I adore that book. That's what I use to keep all of my poetry. But for some reason, just writing traditionally just changes how I write, I guess.
Like how many musicians and instrumentalists name their instrument, do you name your book?
It's the Betty Riverdale Journal. I call it the Riverdale Journal. It's supposed to be it's an actual, it's a prop that was in the show back when I watched Riverdale. I don't watch it anymore. The corner of the page just says Riverdale, so I call it my Riverdale notebook.
And there were some terms that you used, Devin, that maybe our audience don't know what the definition is. So, what is slam poetry?
I think it's poetry that's performed during competitions, I think, where you just take this subject and you really just rip into it. You take it and you expand on it, you explain it, you take it apart.
Go off, girl, go off.
The poet in me is just you break into it, you destroy it. It's that makes no sense.
Do you have an example from your work of slam poetry?
Oh, here we go. This poem is called Medical Incident by me, Devin Williams. I wrote it about what happened with George Floyd. So yeah, this is my poem, Medical Incident. I learned about the rule of 5 before I could multiply. 5 weeks without food, 5 days without water, 5 minutes without air. How can you say you didn't know? When you pinned him against the ground, your knee to his neck, when you ignored his pleas, your ears filled with his cries. When he said he couldn't breathe, you let 5 minutes pass. When people protested in the streets, you claimed your innocence. When you made sure he couldn't move, you were so confident. When you murdered that man, you said it was a medical incident. That's it.
Are we all doing the shock face?
I need 4 minutes to process that. Hold on.
Oh my gosh. I've actually read that before. We have a document of your poems, but it sounds so different when you perform it. I don't know. It's just so powerful when you read it with your own voice and seeing how your face performed too. it was an experience. You're like such a good performer. Oh my gosh, that was so good.
Thank you. I really love that poem, which is why I kind of sent it, but it is one of those pieces I would call a performing piece where I need to do it in order to get the full experience. It's one of those poems that I wrote and I got really angry. I was writing it because I was very angry. And then I finished it and I was shaking and I was so proud of it. I love that poem.
I absolutely love this poem because it brings back into what is happening, and you can really feel your anger through the words, and it's amazing hearing that. Do you have another one that you would like to perform for us?
I do. Okay. There's one that I think kind of works as that beautiful poem I was talking about before, where it's you could read it. So this poem is called Time. I have it on my phone, which is why I'm looking down. This poem's called Time by me. It began when we started to understand the sun rising and setting. Maybe it began when sparks flew fire at our fingertips. We've reached a new beginning, or maybe it started from loud endings, booming bangs from space, hangs in what was once a quiet galaxy. Maybe that's when the sand started pouring, the clock started ticking, minutes started sticking in our mind. The hour is now a measurable currency, but when did that begin? Maybe in some book written by some philosopher with too big a mind and too little time holds the answer, but until it's known, I raise the question, when did time begin?
I love that one. Oh my god, you have no idea how many times like it stays in my head rent free. I don't know if that feels to you, but to me, whenever I read your poetry, it just feels so effortless. What would you say to your inner critic?
Yo, you gotta shut up. That's what I'd probably say. Because there have been times where I'll write a poem and it's like, I don't think much of it. And then I come back like a couple months later, I'm like, dang, I popped off with this. Why did I go so hard for no reason?
As you should. um, do you ever revisit and add on to poems you've written?
Usually I don't, but there have been some exceptions, especially if there was like a poem that I wrote a long time ago and I didn't like some certain lines. I think it could have been better. I see what I was trying to do, so I'll just take it and I'll take those lines that I like and then I'll redo it.
Our theme at TAC for this year is mindfulness, mindfulness in your art. What does mindfulness mean to you, and how is that reflected in your art?
Mindfulness to me means like becoming understanding with yourself and your surroundings and being thoughtful for what's going on, all those types of things. Um, there's a poem that I wrote called Pale Yellow, in which I'm just talking about a color. And for me, when I see that color, I'm reflecting on myself. I'm reflecting on what that color makes me feel, where I've seen that color, what it reminds me of. And that's why I wrote that poem. There's certain poems where I just take one small thing and I just think about it so hard and I connect to it and I put it into these words that are like really big for no reason, other than because that one thing makes me feel some type of way.
What about recent events? You've mentioned the Black Lives Matter protests and the death of George Floyd. Are what's happening in the world, does that inspire your art a lot? And do you use your art as a form of activism?
I feel like I want to say I do use it as a form of activism, but for me, writing is just getting that weight off my chest. I can't help but write when something happens. There's poems that I wrote about being in quarantine, about what's going on in the world, about um, racism a lot, or my sexuality, or any of those things, because I can't help but think about those things because that's just my world. I would say that I post them so other people can feel empowered or things like that. But the truth is, I post them because it's just a way for me to express myself, I guess. It's a little selfish, but I think it is okay to be selfish sometimes with art.
Do you have any favorite poets, writers, that kind of thing?
I really don't, because oddly enough, I don't like reading poetry. I love watching it be performed and stuff like that, but I kind of don't read a lot of poetry at all. Um, there is a lot of like competitions in Tacoma or in Washington, and a lot of chances to get to see a lot of other youth poets. And I think that's where I get a lot of like push to be like, oh, I want to be like them. For example, TCC has a poetry club, and I've seen them perform a couple times, and they are incredible, and it is wonderful, and it is so good. And so instead of seeing bigger names or having one poet that I really like or that I read the works of, I just see other teen artists and I'm like, oh my gosh, you are incredible, and you're not even 18 yet.
So, with mindfulness, it is also important to be mindful about your mental state and sometimes we get writer's block. What has kept you interested in your art form?
Writing for myself, that's kind of how I am able to write so much. For me, I think that when you write, you have to write for yourself. If you don't feel like writing, then don't write. If you're not getting inspiration from something, then you don't need to feel pressure about it. And I think that goes with anything. Like, I also love knitting. And there was a point where I was knitting for other people, and they would pay me to knit certain things for them. And that was all fine until I realized I wasn't doing anything for myself. I wasn't enjoying it. I was just doing it because they wanted me to do it. So I stopped, and I just only knit for myself now. And I apply the same philosophy towards just about anything that I do.
So, this has been the interview with Devin Williams. You should most certainly check her out.
I'm Devin Williams. On Instagram, you can find me at ydal.lady or at devknits. There is a program for teens, or I guess youth in general, that are into writing called Write 253. You can find them on Instagram at Write 253. They are wonderful. They're lovely people. They have competition coming up called Louder Than a Bomb. You can see a lot of teenagers, including yours truly, and my team, performing through a Zoom meeting. It is going to be lovely and wonderful. They do it every year. It is great. So, yeah.
We are the Teen Art Council at the Tacoma Art Museum. You can follow us on Instagram at TamTeens or the Art Museum at Tacoma Art Museum. Every third Thursday, we do a virtual open night where we talk about mindfulness and art and usually have some fun art making activities. Please feel free to stop by. The link is in our bio and more information can be found on our Instagram.
My name is Rachel.
My name is Evelyn.
And I'm Carolina.
And this was Project Art Eyes presented by Tacoma Art Museum's Teen Art Council. We'll see you next time.